There's something about the word anaconda that immediately conjures images of both dread and fascination. You hear it, and suddenly you're somewhere deep in the Amazon, sweltering humidity pressing down, the murky waters stretching endlessly into shadowy unknowns, and somewhere beneath those waters, there's something waiting, something that doesn't belong to the human world. When I first sat down with the trailer for Anaconda, I remember this immediate tension, this tug between adventure and terror, and honestly, that's what makes it compelling cinema in its own way. You can tell, from the very first frame of the trailer, that the filmmakers were not just interested in a conventional jungle adventure. They wanted a predator, a force of nature, and they wanted to place it in direct confrontation with human hubris. The trailer opens in this deceptively serene way. There's the jungle, golden light piercing through the canopy, the kind of cinematography that almost lulls you into a false sense of security. And then, just as you start absorbing the beauty, the cut hits, a shadow under the water, and suddenly there's tension in the air that you can almost feel pressing against your chest. This is classic suspense building, and in terms of trailer construction, it's really effective. They're giving you glimpses, teasing the threat without revealing too much. The snake, the anaconda itself, is more of a presence than a character at this point. You feel it before you see it, which is, in my opinion, one of the strongest parts of horror and thriller trailers. Suggestion over exposition. As the trailer progresses, the human element becomes clear. You have a documentary crew, explorers, people who, in theory, know what they're doing, or at least think they do. And this is where Anaconda taps into a fundamental cinematic trope. Humans venturing into environments that are intrinsically hostile, underestimating their own vulnerability. The dialogue in the trailer is punchy, sharp, and while it leans into some genre cliches, it does so with a wink. You hear lines about legends, massive snakes, and survival. But what the trailer cleverly does is never let the danger become mundane. It's a careful balancing act. Give the audience a sense of stakes, but don't reveal the punchline too soon. You can tell the filmmakers understood that suspense relies on pacing and escalation, not on showing the monster from frame one. There's also this fascinating interplay between technology and nature hinted at in the trailer. Cameras, boats, microphones, and other modern tools of the documentary crew are all rendered almost useless when confronted with the sheer scale and cunning of the anaconda. It's almost a meta-commentary. No matter how much we believe we can control the world around us, nature has its own rhythm, and it's entirely indifferent to human intention. That idea, which the trailer communicates silently through the juxtaposition of human equipment and the snake's lethality, gives the film more weight than one might expect from a straightforward thriller about a giant predator. One of the most striking sequences in the trailer, and I remember this vividly because it's designed to stick in your memory, is the first fully revealed shot of the snake. It's massive, coiled, and you can see the scales glinting in the murky water. There's an almost painterly composition to it. The snake dominates the frame, dwarfing the humans around it, which instantly establishes the power dynamic. That shot isn't just about fear, it's about awe. The filmmakers clearly wanted the audience to feel the scale, to feel the humbling effect of nature's extremity. And the tension here isn't just in what the snake might do, it's in the anticipation, in imagining just how it will interact with the humans who are so clearly out of their depth. Sound design in the trailer is another element that deserves attention. It's subtle, but incredibly effective. There's this low, resonant hum beneath the scenes in the water, punctuated by sudden, sharp splashes or rustling foliage. It's almost instinctual. The human brain reacts to these cues because they mimic natural danger signals. Something moving stealthily, something large, something that could strike at any moment. The trailer uses these audio cues to create an omnipresent sense of tension, reinforcing the visual cues and giving the impression that the danger is everywhere and nowhere at once. And then, of course, there's the pacing. The trailer doesn't rush. It gives us moments to breathe. The characters interact, the environment is explored, but then, just as the audience starts to relax, there's a sudden escalation. A scream, a snap, a glimpse of the snake's sheer strength. That rhythm, the ebb and flow of suspense, mirrors the tension we expect to feel in the film itself. It's a classic thriller technique, but one executed with enough precision to make the trailer feel alive rather than formulaic. You can tell that every beat is calculated to maintain anxiety while keeping the audience engaged and guessing. Character hints in the trailer are interesting as well. You can sense the archetypes without being told explicitly. The seasoned guide who knows the jungle, the ambitious filmmaker hungry for footage, the skeptic who questions the premise, and the scientist whose curiosity may be his undoing. Even without dialogue, the framing, the reactions, and the camera angles convey personality. This is key because in a thriller like Anaconda, tension is not only external, but also interpersonal. The trailer subtly sets up potential conflicts among the humans, which hints at a layered narrative. It's not just humans versus snake. It's humans versus human assumptions, fears, and limitations. And the trailer captures that dual threat elegantly. The trailer also gives us early glimpses of practical effects work, which is notable. Given the film's release era and the budget, the creators leaned heavily on animatronics and physical sets for the snake sequences. This choice, while limiting in some technical ways, adds a tactile authenticity that CGI often struggles to replicate. The trailer shows a few sequences where the snake interacts with watercraft, leaves, and people. And even in these short bursts, you get a visceral sense of presence that elevates the stakes. The tactile reality of the threat is a critical element in why the trailer grabs attention, and why audiences subconsciously feel a stronger connection to the danger. There's a thematic undercurrent in the trailer that deserves mention: exploration as hubris. The human characters are in this lush, dangerous environment, armed with curiosity and ambition, but the trailer subtly implies that their arrogance may be their undoing. You see it in the way they navigate the river, in the casual confidence with which they treat the legends of the Anaconda, and in the framing that constantly positions the humans as smaller, more vulnerable, and almost ornamental compared to the vastness of the jungle. It's a quiet narrative layer, but it's effective. It elevates the film beyond mere creature feature to something with a reflective edge about human folly and respect for the unknown. And of course, the final beat of the trailer is critical. It's designed to leave the audience unsettled, to linger in the mind long after the trailer ends. A scream, a sudden movement under the water, or a close-up of the snake's eye. All of these cues serve as a psychological hook. It's not just about fear, it's about anticipation, curiosity, and the promise of adrenaline. The trailer understands the psychology of suspense and leverages it expertly, ensuring that viewers leave wanting more, not because they've been shown everything, but because they've been shown enough to ignite the imagination. The musical cues deserve their own note here. There's a pulsating rhythm, understated at first, that builds steadily in tandem with the visual tension. It's not overtly dramatic, not bombastic, but it grows like a heartbeat, quickening as the action intensifies, and then suddenly cutting to silence in moments where the human characters are vulnerable or isolated. This interplay of sound and silence is crucial in creating a roller coaster of tension and serves as a subtle manipulation of audience emotion. You feel the suspense physically, and the trailer's designers knew exactly how to exploit this. One interesting thing about the trailer that I keep returning to is the interplay of visibility and concealment. You rarely see the full snake early on. Most shots are partial, framed through foliage, water, or shadows. This creates a sense of mystery and unease. Our minds fill in the gaps with the worst-case scenario. The trailer demonstrates a deep understanding of fear psychology. What we imagine is always more terrifying than what is fully revealed. The moments where the snake is fully revealed are deliberate, impactful, and timed to maximize shock. And while it's very much a thriller at first glance, there's an undeniable sense of adventure threaded throughout the trailer. You feel the lushness of the Amazon, the weight of the environment, the scale of the rivers and forests. It's visually captivating, and that sense of awe adds a counterbalance to the terror. You get the idea that this film is not only about survival, but also about immersion in a world that's both beautiful and deadly, a duality that trailers often struggle to convey, but Anaconda manages effectively. There's also an underlying commentary, perhaps unintended but perceptible, on the human desire to dominate and document nature. The camera crew represents modernity, observation, and control, while the Anaconda embodies primal, untamed power. The tension between these forces is the heartbeat of the trailer, and by extension, the film. Watching it, you're made aware of the fragility of human constructs when confronted with the scale and unpredictability of nature. Finally, the trailer hints at moments of dark humor, a tonal nuance that prevents the film from becoming relentlessly oppressive. Brief exchanges between characters, or the absurdity of certain predicaments, create small pockets of levity. It's a careful calibration, tension interspersed with humor, which keeps the audience engaged without undermining the suspense. This tonal balance, often underestimated in trailers, is what can make a film like Anaconda resonate beyond its immediate thrills. The trailer, in its roughly 2-minute runtime, sets the stage brilliantly. It introduces danger, characters, environment, and mood, while keeping key narrative elements shrouded in mystery. By the end, you're left with an almost tangible sense of the stakes and an urgent curiosity about how this story will unfold, which is precisely what a trailer should do. It's a masterclass in teasing without revealing, and it frames the film as not just a monster movie, but an exploration of tension, scale, and human vulnerability in the face of overwhelming natural power. Watching it now, years later, you can see how it encapsulates the late 90s approach to thriller marketing. Emphasis on suspense, a hint of spectacle, and a carefully constructed tease of the narrative's danger and excitement. There's an innocence and confidence in the approach, a reliance on atmosphere and audience imagination over cheap shock, and that's part of what makes it memorable. The trailer doesn't just sell the film. It sells the experience of confronting the unknown, the thrill of adrenaline, and the humbling reminder that we are, in many ways, tiny against the vastness of the natural world. When we move past the trailer and actually enter the film itself, the opening sequences immediately establish tone and setting with an almost cinematic precision that belies the B-movie reputation the title sometimes carries. The movie starts with a dense, almost suffocating aerial shot of the Amazon rainforest, the camera weaving between towering trees, over rivers glinting in the harsh sunlight, establishing that this is not a tame wilderness. The cinematography here deserves credit because it immediately immerses you in the environment. You feel the heat, the humidity, and the latent sense of danger. It's clear that the jungle is not merely a backdrop. It is an active participant in the narrative. We are introduced to a documentary crew headed by Terry Flores, a character whose ambition and meticulous attention to detail are immediately apparent. Terry is both professional and determined, embodying the archetype of the driven explorer. But she is layered with a quiet vulnerability that the film subtly conveys through her interactions with the crew and her reactions to the jungle. The initial sequences focus on her team preparing for the journey, loading equipment, setting up cameras, discussing the legends surrounding the elusive tribes, and the supposedly enormous anaconda that lurks in the rivers. These conversations are critical because they establish both the stakes and the human dynamics before the central threat emerges. The team sets out on a river expedition, and almost immediately, the film begins to juxtapose human curiosity with nature's unpredictability. The river is serene, almost deceivingly so, but the camera frames occasional hints of what lies beneath. Ripples, shadows, subtle movements, creating a tension that permeates every shot. These early sequences are deceptively slow, but the pacing is deliberate. By allowing the audience to absorb the jungle's vastness and the vulnerability of the humans, the filmmakers increase the impact of the later confrontations with the snake. One of the most interesting aspects of the first act is the introduction of Paul Cerrone, the mercenary hunter, whose knowledge of the Amazon is extensive, but whose moral compass is decidedly ambiguous. Cerrone is both charismatic and menacing, a man whose intentions are shrouded in a combination of charm and menace. The film does not initially reveal the full scope of his motivations, which creates an undercurrent of tension. From the very first encounter, it is clear that Cerrone is both a potential ally and a wild-card threat, which keeps the audience guessing. His presence adds a human antagonist dimension, which complements the animal threat in a way that makes the narrative more complex than a simple predator versus prey story. The narrative carefully establishes the human relationships at play. The crew includes several distinctive personalities: a skeptical cameraman, a botanist with a curious fascination for dangerous wildlife, and a navigator whose confidence occasionally masks inexperience. Each character is written with enough specificity to make the audience care about their fates, and their interactions serve to build tension and occasional humor. The dialogue is functional but naturalistic, which enhances the believability of the scenario. These are people reacting as humans would in an unfamiliar, dangerous environment. The first real encounter with the Anaconda is set up with a masterful combination of suspense and misdirection. The crew notices unusual disturbances in the water, ripples that do not correspond with the visible wildlife. There's a scene where they pull a rope taut, expecting to retrieve a simple net, but it snaps with violent force, hinting at the snake's immense strength. The filmmakers cleverly use practical effects here. Partial animatronics and off-screen suggestions allow the audience's imagination to fill in the gaps, which often results in a more frightening experience than revealing the entire creature immediately. This first hint of true danger is sudden and visceral, signaling that the movie will operate in a space where suspense and shock coexist. Tension escalates as the crew ventures deeper into the jungle. Terry and her team begin to encounter environmental challenges, treacherous rapids, thick undergrowth, and sudden wildlife encounters. Each sequence reinforces the theme that human expertise and modern technology have limits when pitted against an untamed ecosystem. These sequences also serve a narrative purpose, allowing character development to unfold organically. Under stress, personalities clash, alliances form and fracture, and individual fears come to the surface. The script emphasizes this aspect, giving the thriller more emotional depth than might be expected from a creature-focused film. Cerrone's influence grows as the story progresses. He begins to subtly manipulate the crew, using his knowledge of the Amazon to position himself as indispensable, while simultaneously pursuing his own hidden agenda. The tension here is multi-layered. There is the external threat of the snake, the environmental hazards of the jungle, and the internal human conflict introduced by Cerrone's morally ambiguous actions. The filmmakers balance these elements carefully, creating a narrative rhythm that keeps the audience engaged without overwhelming them with constant action. The Anaconda itself becomes a more visible threat gradually, a decision that demonstrates an understanding of suspense. Early glimpses show massive coils in the water, destructive movements, and powerful jaws, but the full reveal is delayed, allowing anticipation to build. Each encounter is strategically timed. A sudden attack on the boat, a near miss while navigating a narrow river passage, or the terrifying sound of movement in the dense foliage. These moments are not just about fear. They illustrate the snake's intelligence and adaptability, reinforcing that this is a predator operating on instinct, but with lethal precision. One of the film's most memorable sequences in this first part occurs when the crew attempts to cross a river section known to be particularly dangerous. The tension is amplified by tight framing, close-up shots of paddles slicing through water, and the characters' strained expressions. Suddenly, the Anaconda strikes, and the chaos is both spectacular and horrifying. The camera work emphasizes scale. The snake dwarfs the human figures, its power is overwhelming, and the crew's vulnerability is stark. Practical effects, combined with clever editing, make this encounter feel authentic, and the audience experiences the terror almost physically. Character dynamics continue to evolve under pressure. Terry's leadership qualities are tested. She must balance assertiveness with empathy, protecting the crew while making split-second decisions. Meanwhile, Cerrone's unpredictable behavior forces the group to constantly reassess their trust and strategy. The interplay of fear, strategy, and survival instinct becomes a central theme, as every decision carries life or death consequences. The film uses these interpersonal dynamics effectively to heighten suspense. Audiences become invested not only in surviving the snake, but in seeing how human relationships endure under extreme stress. The narrative also explores the concept of obsession. Several crew members exhibit curiosity bordering on recklessness, the drive to capture footage, to study the anaconda, or to assert control over the environment. This obsession becomes a source of conflict and narrative propulsion. It's clear that the filmmakers are subtly commenting on human tendencies to underestimate nature and overestimate personal capability. Each choice the characters make is grounded in their personalities and motivations, making the unfolding peril feel earned rather than arbitrary. The first act's climax in this part is both literal and thematic. The anaconda strikes in a dramatic set piece involving multiple crew members and the jungle's natural hazards. Water splashes, ropes snap, and there's a palpable sense of panic. The scene is choreographed to highlight not just the creature's might, but the vulnerability and ingenuity of the humans. Some escape, some are caught in moments of terrifying suspense, and the audience is left with an intense sense of uncertainty about who will survive. The scene serves as a microcosm of the film's larger themes: human fragility, the unpredictability of nature, and the thin line between control and chaos. By the end of this first section, the foundation is fully laid. The jungle is established as a formidable character. The human crew's personalities and dynamics are clearly defined. Saron's ambiguous motivations are teasingly complex, and the anaconda itself has transitioned from an unseen presence to a palpable threat. The audience is now deeply immersed in a world where survival is uncertain, strategy is constantly tested, and tension permeates both environment and interpersonal relationships. Even in these early stages, Anaconda demonstrates a careful calibration between horror, adventure, and character drama. Each scene serves multiple purposes: advancing the plot, deepening character development, building suspense, or showcasing environmental peril. The careful pacing, practical effects, and psychological tension work together to ensure that the story's momentum continues, even in quieter moments. The film respects the audience's intelligence by allowing fear, curiosity, and suspense to build gradually, rather than relying solely on shock or spectacle. As we continue deeper into the narrative, the tension escalates both externally and internally. The initial encounters with the anaconda have left the crew rattled, and the weight of their own mistakes begins to press on them. Terry, in particular, carries the psychological burden of leadership. Every decision she makes is scrutinized, not just by the audience, but by the other characters, creating a palpable sense of responsibility that amplifies the suspense. The jungle itself seems to respond to these dynamics. Shots linger on twisting vines, shadowed riverbanks, and the ominous rustling of unseen wildlife, as if the environment itself is conspiring with the predator. The story takes a turn when the crew realizes that Saron's intentions are far more self-serving than they initially suspected. Early hints of greed and obsession now crystallize into full-fledged manipulation. He begins to assert control over their route, subtly steering them into more dangerous territory under the guise of expertise. This is a pivotal moment in the narrative because it shifts part of the audience's focus from purely fearing the snake to also fearing human unpredictability. Saron becomes a secondary predator in the story, his moral ambiguity mirroring the chaos of the natural world they've entered. It's a clever narrative device. While the anaconda embodies instinctual, unstoppable threat, Saron represents calculated, human-constructed danger. Equally lethal, but differently motivated. As the film progresses, the team is forced to contend with increasingly hazardous conditions. The river widens, revealing hidden currents and underwater obstacles that threaten both their safety and their progress. Here, the cinematography shines. Low-angle shots, reflections on water, and framing through dense foliage create a sense of claustrophobic scale. The filmmakers are constantly reminding the audience that while humans may think they are navigating the environment, and the predator within it retains control. It's an elegant way of reinforcing thematic stakes without overloading the plot with exposition. The Anaconda's appearances are strategically placed to maximize suspense. One memorable sequence involves a sudden strike at the edge of the boat. The crew hears a colossal splash before the snake is even seen, and the camera only partially reveals its massive coils. The characters' reactions, screams, frantic attempts to stabilize the boat, create a visceral response in the audience. This is a deliberate choice by the filmmakers to keep the creature both terrifying and unpredictable. By teasing the snake's presence, they allow tension to build naturally, which is far more effective than a constant, fully revealed monster. The interpersonal dynamics continue to evolve under pressure. The botanist, initially skeptical of danger, begins to exhibit panic and uncertainty, highlighting how prolonged exposure to life-threatening situations erodes rational thought. The cameraman, previously brash and overconfident, demonstrates ingenuity under stress, revealing layers of character previously hidden. These shifts are crucial because they add realism and depth. The audience is not just watching characters survive, but watching human psychology adapt, or fail to adapt, under extreme duress. It's this attention to human behavior that elevates the narrative beyond a simple man versus snake story. Terry's relationship with the rest of the crew becomes more complex as the Anaconda attacks escalate. She must negotiate leadership challenges while maintaining morale, which leads to moments of conflict and reconciliation that feel earned and natural. These interactions are interwoven with moments of action in a way that keeps the pacing dynamic. Tension ebbs and flows, allowing both suspense and character development to coexist without feeling forced. The film, in these sequences, demonstrates a clear understanding of rhythm, something many thrillers overlook. Cerrone's true plan begins to surface in subtle ways. He's hunting for the creature not purely out of fear or self-preservation, but out of a desire for control and exploitation. His fascination with the Anaconda borders on obsession, and the film uses this to explore themes of human arrogance. While the crew views the snake as a mortal threat, Cerrone approaches it as an opportunity, whether for money, fame, or personal dominance. This dual perspective on the same entity, the Anaconda as both unstoppable predator and potential commodity, adds a layer of narrative sophistication. It frames the conflict as more than survival. It becomes a study of human ambition versus natural order. One of the most gripping sequences in this second part involves the crew attempting to cross a particularly treacherous river bend. The Anaconda strikes with brutal precision, causing the boat to capsize. The scene is chaotic. Water churns, ropes snap, and the camera alternates between wide shots of the struggle and close-ups of individual panic-stricken faces. Practical effects, combined with clever editing, make the threat feel tangible. The audience experiences the sequence not just visually, but physically. The tension is palpable, the danger immediate. It's an escalation from earlier encounters, reinforcing the snake's intelligence and adaptability, while simultaneously testing human resilience. The narrative also spends time exploring fear as a psychological tool. The crew hears sounds in the jungle that may or may not be the Anaconda. The filmmakers cleverly manipulate perspective. Shadows, water movements, and rustling foliage create uncertainty. Are they being stalked? Are they imagining the danger? These moments of ambiguity heighten suspense, as the audience is left in a state of anticipatory anxiety. By blending real and perceived threats, the film captures the unpredictable nature of fear itself. Terry's decision-making becomes increasingly strategic. She starts to anticipate the Anaconda's behavior, using environmental cues to plan the crew's movements. This not only empowers her character, but provides a sense of progression. The humans are learning to adapt to their predator rather than remaining passive. These sequences are particularly compelling because they demonstrate that survival is as much about intellect and observation as it is about physical capability. The tension is maintained not just through action, but through calculated problem solving, which adds narrative depth. Meanwhile, Cerrone's duplicity intensifies. He begins to withhold critical information from the crew, manipulating their movements to place himself advantageously. This creates internal conflict that parallels the external threat posed by the anaconda. The film balances these layers effectively. Suspense is not solely derived from the monster, but also from human mistrust and ambition. Audiences are constantly forced to evaluate who to fear more, the snake or the man. A turning point occurs when the crew experiences their first significant loss. One of the team members falls victim to the anaconda, and the scene is devastatingly effective. It is sudden, brutal, and emotionally resonant. The filmmakers resist the urge to sensationalize the moment. Instead, the focus is on reaction, the shock, grief, and fear that ripple through the remaining crew. This reinforces the stakes and ensures that the audience understands the real danger without resorting to gratuitous spectacle. The jungle itself continues to assert its dominance. Storms, unpredictable currents, and wildlife hazards serve as constant reminders of human vulnerability. Every obstacle is a narrative opportunity. The filmmakers use these environmental challenges to test character, build tension, and expand the story's thematic scope. The anaconda may be the central antagonist, but the jungle acts as an omnipresent, shaping force. Survival is never guaranteed, and this omnipresent danger underscores the precariousness of the crew's situation. By this stage, the film is operating on multiple layers of suspense. Physical threats, psychological stress, and moral ambiguity intertwine seamlessly. Terry's evolving leadership, Sarone's manipulations, and the unpredictable behavior of the anaconda converge to create a story that feels both dynamic and coherent. The filmmakers maintain a careful balance between action sequences and quieter, reflective moments, allowing the audience to breathe, assess, and anticipate. In one particularly tense scene, the crew is forced to navigate a river maze filled with submerged obstacles. Visibility is low, tension is high, and the anaconda's presence is suggested rather than fully revealed. The fear here is compounded by environmental hazards, snags, eddies, and sudden drops in current. The filmmakers leverage these conditions to maintain suspense without over-reliance on monster attacks. It's a testament to their understanding that true horror often emerges from anticipation, not constant action. Character interactions in these sequences deepen as well. Frustration, fear, and moral disagreements surface, adding emotional texture to the peril. Terry must mediate conflicts while managing her own fear. Sarone continues to manipulate, and other crew members reveal strengths and weaknesses previously unnoticed. The story thrives on these human elements, grounding the fantastical threat of a massive snake in relatable human behavior. Audiences are compelled to care not only about surviving the monster, but also about how the characters navigate interpersonal complexities under duress. The stakes continue to rise as the crew's journey pushes them further into the heart of the Amazon, where the environment is no longer just a backdrop, but an active and antagonistic presence. The river narrows, dense foliage presses against their path, and the crew becomes acutely aware of the isolation surrounding them. Every sound is amplified. The snap of a branch, the splash of water, even distant bird calls, all potentially masking the presence of the anaconda. The filmmaker's choice to blend natural soundscapes with moments of silence heightens suspense in a way that feels organic and immersive. The audience is not just observing, they are being made to feel the precariousness of the setting alongside the characters. Terry, having endured previous encounters with the anaconda, begins to evolve from a cautious leader into a proactive strategist. Her decisions are no longer reactive, but calculated, weighing each risk with a mixture of instinct and intelligence. This growth is essential because it reinforces her credibility as the central figure of the story. We see her balancing empathy for the crew with the hard choices required for survival, which humanizes her and makes her victories and losses resonate more deeply. Each action she takes reflects accumulated experience and learned knowledge, allowing the audience to invest emotionally in her journey, rather than viewing her as a typical adventure archetype. The anaconda itself becomes increasingly intelligent in its behavior, demonstrating a predatory cunning that elevates it from simple monster to fully realized antagonist. Early attacks relied on brute force, sudden strikes, and sheer size. But now the creature seems to anticipate human movement, exploiting environmental advantages and human errors. The filmmakers cleverly use point-of-view shots to suggest that the snake is observing the crew, reinforcing the sense that it is not merely acting on instinct, but is an intelligent, adaptive predator. This evolution in the creature's portrayal adds complexity and keeps suspense fresh. The audience is continually surprised, never complacent. Meanwhile, Cerrone's duplicity reaches a climax in subtle ways. He manipulates information, directs the crew toward perilous passages, and cultivates a dependency on his knowledge. The tension between human and human now mirrors the tension between human and nature. In some ways, Cerrone is a mirror of the Anaconda, calculating, opportunistic, and willing to exploit weaknesses for personal gain. This layered approach to antagonism gives the story depth, forcing the audience to grapple with moral ambiguity while also fearing physical danger. Survival is no longer about brute strength alone. It is about psychological acuity, trust, and the consequences of misplaced judgment. A key sequence in this section involves the crew navigating a flooded area with partially submerged trees and debris. The Anaconda attacks with remarkable speed, ensnaring one of the crew members. The filmmakers use tight framing, close-ups of frantic hands and faces, and rapid editing to create a sense of chaos and immediacy. The audience experiences every heart-stopping moment almost viscerally, a testament to both the practical effects and the cinematographic choices. The danger feels tangible, not CGI-driven spectacle. It's grounded in physicality and consequence. The emotional resonance of these moments is amplified by the characters' reactions. Fear, desperation, and grief interplay naturally, highlighting the psychological toll of prolonged exposure to life-threatening circumstances. Terry must process these losses while maintaining a sense of hope and leadership, creating moments of tension between emotional vulnerability and practical necessity. This nuanced portrayal of stress under duress elevates the film beyond mere creature horror. It becomes a study in human endurance, resilience, and decision-making under extreme conditions. Another layer of tension arises from resource management. The crew's supplies are limited, and as they face environmental challenges, dwindling provisions, and equipment failures, every decision carries increased weight. Water currents, navigation errors, and mechanical failures are leveraged by the filmmakers to emphasize vulnerability and unpredictability. This narrative choice reinforces the jungle's dominance as a character. Survival is never guaranteed, and the human presence feels increasingly fragile. Each small victory, managing to repair a motor, securing a safe passage, serves as a narrative reprieve, giving the audience a chance to catch their breath before the next high-stakes encounter. As the story advances, Cerrone's obsession with capturing or controlling the Anaconda intensifies. His calculated maneuvers reveal a willingness to endanger the crew to achieve his goals. This intensifies the dual threat. Humans are not only contending with the external predator, but also with internal moral and strategic challenges. The film effectively maintains suspense by ensuring that danger is multidimensional, psychological, ethical, and physical, which prevents the narrative from becoming monotonous. The audience is constantly forced to assess multiple variables, keeping engagement high. In one particularly memorable sequence, the crew attempts to navigate a series of rapids that are deceptively calm in appearance, but conceal underwater hazards. The Anaconda strikes, using the river's currents to its advantage, creating a scene of chaos and near disaster. The filmmakers excel in blending practical effects with environmental tension, ensuring that the peril feels immediate and grounded. The camera work emphasizes scale and perspective. The massive snake coils around the boat, the crew struggles against both water and predator, and the jungle looms as an imposing, omnipresent force. The sequence is a masterclass in kinetic suspense, balancing physical danger with narrative clarity. The human relationships continue to evolve alongside the escalating external threat. Tensions flare, alliances shift, and trust becomes a scarce commodity. Terry's leadership is repeatedly tested as she must navigate not only the environmental hazards and the Anaconda's attacks, but also the moral ambiguity of Sarone's decisions. These interpersonal conflicts are woven seamlessly into the action, ensuring that the story remains character-driven even amidst spectacle. The stakes are personal, emotional, and physical, creating a narrative density that sustains engagement. The narrative pacing is deliberate and effective. Quiet, suspenseful moments allow the audience to anticipate the next strike, while sudden bursts of action provide cathartic release. The filmmakers understand the rhythm of tension, manipulating expectation and surprise to maintain a gripping experience. Each encounter with the Anaconda is not just a display of physical threat, but a carefully constructed narrative beat that advances character development and thematic resonance. A significant turning point in this part occurs when the crew realizes the Anaconda is not merely reacting to immediate stimuli, but seems to be strategically targeting them. This realization heightens fear because it shifts the narrative from unpredictable danger to calculated predation. The snake's intelligence, previously implied, becomes explicit. It is not simply a force of nature, but an active agent capable of exploiting human weaknesses. This escalation intensifies the suspense and underscores the narrative's thematic focus on human vulnerability in the face of superior natural forces. As the crew faces these mounting threats, the story emphasizes endurance and adaptation. Terry's growth as a leader becomes central. She learns to read environmental cues, anticipate the snake's behavior, and coordinate the crew's survival strategies. These sequences are both thrilling and instructive, demonstrating that survival is a dynamic interplay of intellect, instinct, and human cooperation. The audience witnesses a transformation from reactive fear to proactive strategy, a progression that mirrors classical adventure storytelling, but with heightened psychological realism. The Anaconda's attacks remain varied and inventive, preventing predictability. One moment, it strikes from the water with brute force. Another, it emerges from foliage, using camouflage and ambush to exploit human error. The filmmakers skillfully vary these encounters, ensuring that suspense is maintained without repetitive beats. The unpredictability reinforces the creature's role as an intelligent antagonist and preserves the audience's sense of danger. By the end of this section, the narrative has firmly established a high-stakes environment. The jungle is unforgiving. The Anaconda is a formidable predator. Sarone is a manipulative wildcard, and the crew's cohesion is tested to the limits. Each character has undergone development, facing psychological and physical challenges that reveal their strengths, weaknesses, and motivations. The story's complexity is elevated by the interplay of external threat, internal conflict, and environmental hazard, creating a multi-layered adventure that engages the audience on multiple levels. The foundation is set for the climactic sequences that will follow. Every element, the psychological tension, environmental peril, human antagonism, and predator threat, is carefully aligned. The audience is not merely observing a creature feature. They are witnessing a dynamic exploration of survival, leadership, and the consequences of human ambition in the face of nature's power. By this point, Anaconda has fully transitioned from initial suspense to a sustained narrative pulse, where every choice matters, and the stakes feel viscerally real. The narrative tension continues to intensify as the crew begins to grasp the full magnitude of the threat they face. By now, it's clear that survival is contingent not just on physical skill or courage, but on foresight, quick thinking, and psychological resilience. Terry emerges as a central anchor for this evolution, her decision-making increasingly strategic and grounded in observation of both the environment and the predator. She starts recognizing patterns in the Anaconda's behavior, the way it strikes, the subtle cues in water movement, the rustling in foliage, and begins to use that knowledge to anticipate attacks. This shift in approach transforms her from a reactive participant to an analytical strategist, giving the audience a reason to root for her beyond the usual hero survives trope. Meanwhile, the dynamic within the crew has reached a critical point. Tensions with Cerrone become more pronounced as his manipulative tendencies escalate. He starts leveraging the crew's fear and uncertainty to assert control over decision-making, subtly undermining Terry's authority. The friction between them is layered. It's not overtly confrontational all the time, but the subtle power plays and shifting alliances add psychological depth to the story. The interplay of trust and deception underscores one of the film's central themes. In extreme circumstances, human behavior can become as unpredictable and dangerous as the predator itself. As the plot progresses, the filmmakers capitalize on the river as both setting and antagonist. The river's currents, submerged logs, and hidden bends create natural hazards that force the crew into situations where mistakes are costly. One particularly gripping sequence involves the crew navigating a narrow gorge where the Anaconda has trapped them between sheer cliffs. The camera work here is immersive. Tight framing conveys claustrophobia, while long shots establish scale, emphasizing the enormity of the natural obstacles. Every movement feels consequential, and the audience experiences a persistent tension that mirrors the character's vulnerability. The Anaconda's tactics evolve alongside the narrative, demonstrating a combination of brute force and strategic intelligence. It doesn't attack indiscriminately. Instead, it appears to isolate weaker targets, exploiting both physical limitations and psychological strain. The filmmakers reinforce this intelligence through careful visual storytelling. Subtle hints like a ripple in the water, a shadow gliding beneath the surface, or a coil partially obscured by foliage suggest the snake is anticipating human responses. This creates a continuous sense of unpredictability, maintaining suspense without relying solely on jump scares or over-the-top action. Within the crew, each character faces distinct psychological challenges. The botanist, initially portrayed as cautious and skeptical, begins to exhibit panic under sustained threat, illustrating the erosion of rational thought in prolonged crises. Conversely, the cameraman, once brash and overconfident, demonstrates ingenuity under pressure, revealing layers of character previously unseen. These developments are integral to the narrative, highlighting that survival is as much about psychological adaptability as it is about physical capability. By giving the audience these nuanced portrayals, the story maintains emotional resonance alongside action. Terry's leadership is continuously tested, especially as resource scarcity becomes more pressing. Supplies are limited, and each decision, when to push forward, where to anchor, how to ration food and water, carries weighty consequences. These sequences subtly reinforce the realism of the narrative, reminding viewers that survival is a multidimensional struggle, encompassing environmental, physical, and logistical challenges. The tension is compounded when Cerrone deliberately exploits these vulnerabilities, creating moral dilemmas where the crew must weigh risk versus necessity. One of the most tense sequences in this section involves the crew encountering a sudden storm on the river. Torrential rain, lightning, and rising water levels amplify both the environmental and creature threats. The Anaconda capitalizes on the chaos, striking with precision, while the crew scrambles to secure the boat. The filmmakers employ a combination of practical effects and dynamic cinematography to create a visceral experience. Water sprays, ropes snap, and the camera angles shift to convey disorientation and danger. This moment underscores a recurring motif. Nature is not merely a setting, but an active participant in the narrative, shaping every action and decision. Interpersonal dynamics continue to add complexity to the story. Fear, frustration, and grief heighten conflict, forcing characters to confront not only external threats, but internal discord. Terry's ability to navigate these interactions while maintaining leadership is central to the narrative arc. She demonstrates empathy and decisiveness, mediating disputes and instilling confidence while simultaneously preparing for the Anaconda's next attack. These moments of human tension add texture, ensuring the story remains grounded even amidst high-stakes action. The Anaconda's threat is compounded by strategic storytelling. The filmmakers avoid overexposure, revealing the snake in partial glimpses that exploit the audience's imagination. Whether a coiled body in the water, a flash of a scaled tail, or the shadow of a massive head, each reveal is carefully choreographed to maximize suspense. This technique allows fear to build organically and prevents predictability, keeping viewers engaged throughout the sequence. As the story develops, the psychological stakes escalate alongside the physical ones. Terry's growing awareness of Cerrone's ulterior motives creates tension, as every decision is influenced by potential betrayal. The narrative emphasizes that danger comes not only from the Anaconda, but also from human ambition and duplicity. This duality enriches the storytelling, presenting multiple layers of conflict that sustain audience engagement. Survival requires keen observation, strategic thinking, and ethical discernment, a complex set of challenges that elevates the film above standard creature feature fare. A pivotal scene occurs when the crew attempts to navigate a particularly hazardous section of the river. Submerged obstacles, narrow passages, and turbulent currents converge, forcing split-second decisions. The Anaconda attacks from beneath the water, demonstrating both strength and cunning. The scene is intense, not only for its immediate danger, but also for its demonstration of adaptive problem-solving. Terry coordinates the crew, anticipates the snake's movement, and utilizes environmental features to counter the attack. This reinforces her evolution as a proactive, competent leader, enhancing the audience's investment in her survival. The interplay between environmental hazards and the predator threat continues to escalate, emphasizing a central theme: human vulnerability in the face of natural power. The filmmakers employ a mix of suspenseful pacing, strategic reveals, and psychological tension to maintain engagement. The audience is constantly reminded that survival depends on more than brute force. It requires intelligence, cooperation, and adaptability. Cerrone's manipulations reach a critical point as the crew begins to recognize his self-interest. This realization adds a layer of moral conflict, forcing characters to evaluate trust, loyalty, and risk. The tension between human and human, juxtaposed with the ongoing predator threat, creates a multifaceted narrative that engages viewers on both emotional and intellectual levels. The story emphasizes that danger is rarely singular. It often emerges from intertwined forces, both external and internal. By the end of this section, the narrative has fully established a complex ecosystem of suspense. Environmental hazards, psychological strain, interpersonal conflict, and the Anaconda's intelligence converge to create a richly layered experience. The audience is engaged not only by the physical threat of the creature, but also by the human drama unfolding within the crew. Each character's growth, ethical challenges, and survival strategies are integral to the narrative, ensuring that the stakes remain high and the tension consistently compelling. The foundation is laid for the climactic confrontations to come. The crew has endured escalating danger, internal conflicts have peaked, and the Anaconda's cunning has reached its apex. Every element, character development, environmental hazard, and predator intelligence, is aligned to maximize suspense, making the approaching climax both inevitable and emotionally charged. The audience is primed for a resolution that promises to test courage, intellect, and human resilience in the ultimate confrontation with nature's most formidable predator. As the story reaches its penultimate sequences, the tension between survival instinct and calculated risk becomes nearly unbearable. The crew is now acutely aware that the Anaconda's threat extends beyond brute force. It is an intelligent, adaptive predator, capable of exploiting environmental nuances and human error. Every decision, every hesitation, carries weighty consequences. The filmmakers continue to leverage the jungle itself as an antagonistic force, with oppressive foliage, shifting river currents, and hidden hazards keeping both the characters and the audience on edge. It's in these sequences that the narrative's attention to realism truly shines. The danger is palpable because it is multi-layered, grounded in physics and psychology alike. Terry's role as the anchor of the group has solidified. Her growth is not just a function of plot necessity. It is earned through meticulous observation, quick adaptation, and an evolving understanding of both the creature and her environment. She begins to employ proactive strategies, creating distractions, setting up defensive maneuvers, and reading subtle behavioral patterns of the Anaconda. Her leadership is contrasted sharply with Cerrone, whose manipulations have become increasingly transparent. The tension between ethical leadership and self-serving ambition becomes as central to the narrative as the immediate physical threat. One of the most compelling aspects of this section is how the filmmakers interweave psychological tension with physical danger. For instance, the crew navigates a dense, partially submerged section of river at night. Visibility is near zero, and the faint sounds of movement trigger paranoia. Every ripple in the water, every distant splash, is treated with equal suspicion, heightening suspense. The cinematography here is deliberate. Tight close-ups, skewed camera angles, and shallow depth of field emphasize uncertainty and fear, making the audience feel intimately aligned with the crew's experience. The Anaconda's presence is implied through these environmental cues before it is fully revealed, a technique that amplifies tension organically. Cerrone's duplicity reaches a narrative climax as his plans intersect with the crew's survival needs. He manipulates scenarios to create maximal stress, exploiting the environment and human vulnerabilities simultaneously. His character serves as a reminder that, in extreme circumstances, human ambition can be as dangerous as nature itself. This dual-layer antagonism, the Anaconda and Cerrone, elevates the stakes and provides depth to the narrative. The audience is forced to weigh threats on multiple axes, ensuring engagement remains high and the tension never stagnates. The crew's attempts to confront the Anaconda grow increasingly daring and complex. They implement traps, improvised weapons, and environmental manipulation, attempting to outsmart a creature that seems perpetually one step ahead. The filmmakers strike a careful balance here. The action is thrilling and inventive, but it never feels implausible. The physicality of these encounters, boats capsizing, vines snapping, massive coils constricting, is rendered convincingly through practical effects and careful choreography. The sense of peril is visceral, grounded in tangible stakes rather than purely cinematic spectacle. A particularly tense sequence involves a multi-stage confrontation where the crew uses a combination of fire and coordinated maneuvers to try and corner the Anaconda. The scene is notable not just for its intensity, but for the strategy involved. Each crew member must act in precise coordination, timing their movements to avoid fatal errors. The narrative here rewards observation and clever thinking, highlighting that survival is about intelligence and adaptability as much as courage. These sequences also allow Terry's leadership and decisiveness to shine, reinforcing her evolution from cautious observer to proactive strategist. As the story progresses, the Anaconda's intelligence continues to be emphasized. Its attacks are not random but calculated, using both the natural environment and human behavior to its advantage. The filmmakers employ partial reveals, sound cues, and sudden movements to maintain a constant sense of unpredictability. The creature's behavior evolves with each encounter, preventing repetition and keeping suspense fresh. These elements work in tandem with psychological tension to create a narrative rhythm that alternates between moments of terror, strategy, and reflection. Interpersonal dynamics remain a focal point, adding emotional depth amidst the action. Grief, fear, and frustration influence decision-making, forcing characters to confront both external and internal threats simultaneously. The crew's cohesion is repeatedly tested, with loyalty and trust becoming as crucial as physical skill. Terry's mediation and decisiveness become essential, and the film underscores the emotional cost of leadership under extreme stress. Every victory and setback carries weight because of the established investment in these characters' psychological and emotional arcs. A defining moment occurs when the crew faces the Anaconda in a confined river gorge. The environment amplifies danger. Narrow walls restrict maneuverability, turbulent waters heighten the risk of capsizing, and debris in the current creates additional hazards. The Anaconda attacks strategically, isolating crew members and exploiting environmental constraints. The filmmakers use dynamic camera work to heighten the immediacy of danger. Shots from low angles emphasize the creature's massive size, while rapid cuts convey the chaos of struggle. These technical choices make the confrontation immersive, compelling the audience to viscerally experience the peril alongside the characters. The escalating tension is compounded by resource limitations and environmental uncertainty. Fuel, food, and navigational supplies are dwindling, creating additional layers of conflict. These practical considerations are integrated seamlessly into the narrative, reminding the audience that the jungle itself is a constant, indifferent force. Every decision, from rationing supplies to choosing a navigable path, carries consequences, adding realism to the suspense. The human struggle for survival is thus portrayed as multidimensional, encompassing intellect, emotion, and physical capability. Saron's final manipulations intersect with the crew's survival strategies, creating moral and practical dilemmas. His willingness to endanger others for personal gain serves as a counterpoint to Terry's emerging ethical leadership. The narrative emphasizes that the challenges the crew faces are not solely physical. They are also deeply human, rooted in trust, deception, and the capacity for ethical decision-making under extreme stress. These intertwined conflicts enrich the story and heighten engagement, maintaining suspense while offering psychological complexity. The Anaconda's threat remains a consistent source of tension, with attacks varying in method and intensity. From sudden strikes in open water to ambushes using foliage and debris, the creature demonstrates both brute strength and strategic intelligence. The filmmakers vary these encounters to prevent predictability, ensuring that each confrontation feels fresh and perilous. By maintaining this unpredictability, the narrative sustains suspense across multiple sequences without relying on repetitive action beats. As the story builds toward its climax, Terry's strategic leadership and the crew's resilience are tested to the maximum. Every decision must consider environmental hazards, the Anaconda's evolving tactics, and Saron's interference. The filmmakers create a multi-layered tension that combines psychological, physical, and moral stakes, making the narrative both engaging and immersive. The audience is drawn into a web of danger where success depends on observation, collaboration, and adaptability. By the end of this section, the narrative has fully established a dense ecosystem of threat and tension. The Anaconda is a persistent, intelligent antagonist. Saron's duplicity adds moral complexity. Environmental hazards remain unpredictable, and the crew's psychological and emotional endurance is continuously tested. The story has created a high-stakes framework in which every action, decision, and reaction carries consequence, setting the stage for a climactic confrontation that promises to resolve both the creature threat and human conflicts in a satisfying, tension-filled finale. As the narrative approaches its final act, the pace tightens, and the stakes escalate to near unbearable levels. The Anaconda is no longer just a lurking threat. It has become a fully integrated character in the story, with presence, agency, and unpredictability that demand constant vigilance. Terry's leadership is now fully established, but even she is pushed to the limits of endurance and reasoning. Each decision she makes carries compounded consequences, from the immediate threat of attack to the ripple effects on crew dynamics and morale. The filmmakers maintain tension by combining large-scale physical action with intimate, character-driven suspense, ensuring that the audience experiences both visceral fear and emotional engagement simultaneously. One of the most intense sequences unfolds when the crew is forced to traverse a particularly treacherous section of river. The gorge narrows dramatically, and submerged obstacles make navigation a high-stakes gamble. Every oar stroke, every movement is calculated under extreme duress. The Anaconda strikes with precision, exploiting environmental constraints to maximize impact. The cinematography in this sequence is meticulous. Rapid cuts convey urgency, low-angle shots highlight the creature's enormity, and handheld perspectives create a sense of disorientation, immersing the audience in the chaos. These choices not only amplify tension, but also reinforce the realistic peril of operating in an unforgiving natural environment. Psychologically, the crew is fraying. Prolonged exposure to fear, isolation, and extreme stress reveals individual character traits under duress. The botanist, who started as a cautious observer, begins to unravel mentally, illustrating the erosion of rational thought in the face of sustained danger. In contrast, the cameraman exhibits moments of ingenuity and courage, subverting initial impressions of overconfidence to demonstrate resourcefulness under pressure. These contrasts highlight the film's emphasis on character evolution and psychological realism, ensuring that suspense is grounded in human behavior, rather than relying solely on creature-based terror. The duality of threats, the Anaconda and Sarone's manipulations, remains central. Sarone escalates his self-serving schemes, exploiting fear, misinformation, and fatigue among the crew. His strategic interference creates moral dilemmas that intersect directly with the survival narrative. The audience is constantly reminded that in extreme situations, human ambition and betrayal can be as deadly as any predator. This layered conflict adds depth and complexity, enriching what could otherwise be a straightforward creature feature plot. Terry's tactical thinking reaches its apex in this section. She begins employing sophisticated strategies to counter both environmental hazards and the Anaconda's increasingly cunning attacks. For instance, she sets up improvised diversions and uses natural cover to create opportunities for escape or counterattack. The sequences are visually compelling, relying on practical effects, naturalistic lighting, and careful choreography to convey realism. The film emphasizes that survival is an intricate balance of intellect, observation, and adaptability, rather than brute force alone. One of the pivotal confrontations in this section occurs at night, under oppressive darkness. Limited visibility amplifies fear, and every sound, water lapping against the hull, rustling foliage, distant animal calls, triggers heightened tension. The Anaconda's attacks are interspersed with long periods of suspenseful silence, creating a rhythm that keeps both characters and audience in a heightened state of alert. The filmmakers excel in exploiting human perception. Anticipation and uncertainty are as frightening as any direct attack. Meanwhile, interpersonal dynamics remain under intense strain. Trust is tested continuously, and moral decisions carry immediate survival implications. Terry's mediation becomes increasingly critical as disputes threaten to fracture the group. The narrative emphasizes that cohesion, cooperation, and ethical leadership are essential components of survival, providing a thematic counterpoint to the raw physical danger. These human conflicts are treated with nuance, ensuring they feel organically integrated into the story, rather than inserted as convenient dramatic devices. Environmental hazards remain omnipresent. Rapidly changing river conditions, sudden shifts in water depth, and submerged debris serve as constant reminders of the natural world's unpredictability. The filmmakers use these elements to maintain tension, ensuring that the Anaconda's attacks are never isolated from broader survival challenges. This holistic approach to danger reinforces the realism of the narrative, making the crew's peril feel inescapable and consequential. The Anaconda itself continues to demonstrate both brute strength and calculated intelligence. Its attacks vary in method, ambushing from submerged positions, exploiting environmental constraints, and isolating vulnerable crew members. The filmmakers avoid predictability by diversifying these encounters, maintaining suspense while highlighting the creature's adaptability. This ensures that each confrontation feels unique, and the audience remains engaged without relying on repetitive action sequences. Terry's leadership is consistently contrasted with Sarone's manipulations. While Sarone's actions are self-serving and morally dubious, Terry's decisions emphasize strategy, ethical consideration, and situational awareness. This contrast heightens narrative tension and provides a clear framework for audience empathy. Every victory and setback for Terry is earned through intelligence and resilience, reinforcing her arc from cautious participant to decisive, capable leader. As the climax approaches, sequences of physical danger, psychological stress, and environmental threat converge. The crew's survival depends on precise coordination, adaptability, and the capacity to anticipate the Anaconda's behavior. These multi-layered sequences are punctuated with moments of introspection, fear, and tactical calculation, creating a narrative rhythm that balances suspense with character depth. The audience is invested not only in the outcome of physical confrontations, but also in the character's psychological resilience and moral choices. The filmmakers continue to employ cinematic techniques that amplify tension. Tight framing, dynamic angles, and careful sound design heighten immersion. Environmental audio cues, such as water movement and foliage rustling, signal impending danger and maintain a constant sense of alertness. These elements are seamlessly integrated, ensuring that suspense is sustained without resorting to artificial or over-the-top effects. Character development remains central. The crew's evolving responses to stress and danger highlight the diversity of human behavior under extreme circumstances. Some display ingenuity and courage, others panic or act selfishly, and some are forced to confront their own limitations. These interactions are layered with ethical and strategic considerations, underscoring the narrative's emphasis on human adaptability and the complexity of survival in a hostile environment. By the end of this section, the narrative has positioned the Anaconda as an apex threat, the crew's cohesion as fragile yet essential, and Cerrone's duplicity as an ever-present complicating factor. The convergence of environmental hazards, predator intelligence, and human dynamics sets the stage for a final, high-stakes confrontation. Every plotline, physical, psychological, and moral, is primed for resolution, promising a climax that tests courage, strategy, and ethical judgment in equal measure. The story now pivots into its climactic tension, where every prior buildup converges into sequences that test the limits of both the characters and the narrative structure itself. At this stage, the Anaconda is no longer merely a threat. It functions almost as a force of nature, omnipresent, adaptive, and frighteningly intelligent. Its attacks are less about sheer violence and more about strategic positioning, creating a sense of inevitability. The filmmakers emphasize this by using long, suspenseful shots where the creature's presence is implied rather than explicitly shown. Ripples in the water, sudden shadows, subtle vibrations, each cue generating a visceral reaction in both the characters and the audience. Terry has now fully transitioned into a tactical leader, and her arc is highlighted through proactive problem-solving under pressure. She improvises traps, coordinates movements, and analyzes the Anaconda's behavioral patterns with growing accuracy. These sequences highlight her evolution from cautious observer to decisive strategist, a progression that feels earned because of careful narrative pacing. Her decisions are increasingly informed by both intuition and calculated observation, creating a credible portrayal of leadership under life-threatening stress. Cerrone's manipulative presence becomes even more pronounced as his desperation escalates. His earlier self-serving tactics evolve into outright recklessness, adding tension not just from the Anaconda, but from human unpredictability. His duplicity tests the crew's cohesion and forces Terry to make morally and strategically complex choices. The audience is reminded that human conflict, when layered atop natural threats, often produces the most unpredictable outcomes. Cerrone's moral corruption contrasts sharply with Terry's emerging leadership, reinforcing the thematic core of ethical decision-making under extreme circumstances. The environmental stakes continue to compound the tension. Rapidly changing river currents, treacherous rapids, and dense jungle foliage create obstacles that amplify the Anaconda's attacks. The filmmakers meticulously craft these sequences to maintain a high level of realism, using practical effects and carefully designed set pieces that force the characters into plausible yet dangerous situations. Every action sequence feels grounded, and the physical peril is compounded by the psychological toll of constant vigilance. A particularly harrowing moment occurs during a narrow river passage, where the Anaconda ambushes the crew. Visibility is limited, and the currents are strong, which not only heightens danger, but also forces split-second decision-making. The creature's approach is calculated, exploiting both environmental constraints and the crew's vulnerabilities. The cinematography reinforces tension through dynamic angles, quick cuts, and tight framing, immersing viewers in the chaos while preserving the suspense of unseen danger. This approach allows the filmmakers to sustain fear without relying on gratuitous gore or overused jump scares. Interpersonal dynamics remain integral to the story. Stress and fear expose character vulnerabilities, as well as moments of courage and ingenuity. The botanist, previously timid, demonstrates critical insight that helps Terry anticipate the anaconda's behavior, while the cameraman's resourcefulness enables the group to exploit environmental features to their advantage. These interactions are layered, emphasizing that survival is as much about human collaboration and intelligence as it is about physical confrontation. Each character's actions carry weight, reinforcing the narrative's focus on realism and the stakes of life or death decisions. The Anaconda's attacks are increasingly varied and inventive. Rather than simply striking in predictable bursts, it uses environmental features, submerged branches, narrow channels, and river debris to its advantage. Each encounter is unique, forcing the crew to adapt continually. This variety prevents action fatigue, maintaining suspense and demonstrating the filmmaker's commitment to portraying the creature as a formidable, intelligent predator. The audience is constantly on edge, aware that miscalculation could result in immediate disaster. Terry's leadership is further emphasized through her ethical choices, particularly in contrast to Sarone's selfish tactics. She prioritizes crew safety and resource management while navigating dangerous scenarios, reinforcing her evolution from observer to leader. These choices are integrated seamlessly into action sequences, illustrating that ethical decision-making is not abstract, but a critical component of survival. The tension between self-interest and communal responsibility is threaded throughout these sequences, adding depth to the story beyond mere creature horror. One sequence that stands out involves the crew attempting to maneuver a makeshift raft through rapids, while the anaconda lurks nearby. The tension is multifaceted. Physical skill is required to navigate turbulent waters. Psychological focus is needed to anticipate the creature's next move. And moral coordination is necessary to prevent conflict among crew members. The filmmakers employ sound design masterfully here. Subtle water movements, distant roars, and creaking wood amplify tension, while strategic silence punctuates moments of high stakes, keeping viewers on edge. As the climax intensifies, Terry and her allies implement increasingly sophisticated strategies. Fire, traps, and environmental manipulation are used not just as physical defenses, but as psychological tactics, attempting to disrupt the creature's perception and gain the upper hand. Each maneuver is grounded in plausible reasoning, demonstrating careful thought rather than relying on contrived action beats. The narrative emphasizes intelligence and ingenuity as essential survival tools, reinforcing the character's growth while maintaining suspense. Sarone's manipulations come to a critical junction, intersecting with the crew's survival strategies. His actions create moral dilemmas and force Terry to make split-second decisions that weigh immediate survival against long-term strategy. This dual-layered conflict, creature versus human duplicity, maintains narrative tension while highlighting the thematic focus on human decision-making in extreme environments. Every choice carries tangible consequences, reinforcing the realism and stakes of the story. Environmental hazards remain omnipresent, further heightening suspense. Debris-laden rivers, rapidly shifting currents, and precarious foliage continually complicate escape and combat scenarios. These natural obstacles ensure that the narrative tension remains multidimensional, with danger arising from both external and internal forces. The filmmaker's commitment to integrating these hazards into the storyline enhances immersion and underscores the realistic challenges faced by the crew. The anaconda itself is portrayed with careful attention to behavior and intelligence. Rather than acting as a mindless predator, it exhibits adaptability and strategic cunning, creating encounters that are unpredictable and suspenseful. Its behavior escalates logically, maintaining consistency with previous actions while increasing stakes and avoiding the pitfalls of narrative repetition. This approach allows the creature to remain a credible threat, sustaining tension throughout multiple confrontations. Psychological tension peaks alongside physical peril. Fear, fatigue, and uncertainty influence decisions, forcing the crew to navigate complex moral and strategic landscapes. Terry's decisions balance immediate survival with ethical considerations, reinforcing her leadership and character evolution. The narrative's emphasis on psychology complements the physical action, creating a well-rounded tension that engages viewers both emotionally and viscerally. By the end of this section, all elements, creature intelligence, human dynamics, environmental hazards, and psychological stress, are aligned for the climactic confrontation. The stage is set for a finale that promises to resolve both the external threat of the Anaconda and the internal challenges posed by human conflict. Every prior sequence contributes meaningfully to this convergence, ensuring that the climax will be both thrilling and narratively satisfying. The narrative reaches its ultimate crescendo as all previously established tensions converge into sequences that are both physically intense and psychologically charged. By this stage, the Anaconda has become an almost mythic presence. Its intelligence, adaptability, and sheer size elevate it from a mere creature feature antagonist to a fully realized cinematic force of nature. The crew, under Terry's increasingly authoritative leadership, is forced to engage with this threat not just reactively, but proactively, blending survival instinct with strategic foresight. Terry's evolution is fully realized in these sequences. No longer merely a cautious scientist, she embodies a leader capable of synthesizing information, anticipating danger, and guiding her team under extreme conditions. Her tactical decisions are meticulously plotted, from orchestrating environmental diversions to using improvised tools and natural obstacles as strategic advantages. These moments showcase her analytical mind and moral judgment, illustrating that survival depends as much on intelligence and foresight as it does on physical courage. Saron's manipulative tendencies reach their apex here. His previous schemes, designed to maximize his gain at the expense of others, begin to backfire under the extreme conditions imposed by the Anaconda and the environment. Yet his presence remains a constant threat, introducing moral and strategic complications that heighten tension. Every crew member must navigate a treacherous dual reality, combating a lethal predator while negotiating the treacherous terrain of human ambition and deception. The story emphasizes that the greatest threats are often both external and internal, blurring the line between natural danger and human fault. The environmental hazards escalate dramatically, creating a layered sense of peril. Narrow river gorges, submerged obstacles, and dense jungle growth restrict movement, while sudden changes in current, unexpected debris, and precarious riverbanks heighten the potential for catastrophe. These hazards are seamlessly integrated into the story's tension, ensuring that the crew's every maneuver requires precise calculation. The filmmakers excel in portraying these dangers realistically, with practical effects and strategic camera work that immerse the audience in the treacherous setting. One of the film's most intense sequences occurs when the crew attempts to navigate a rapidly rising section of river at night. The darkness limits visibility, and the roar of the water masks auditory cues, making it difficult to anticipate the Anaconda's approach. Subtle visual cues, a ripple, a shadow, the sudden movement of water, signal imminent danger, and the tension is magnified by the character's heightened stress and rapid decision-making. Cinematic techniques, including low-angle perspectives, tight framing, and dynamic cuts, convey the immediacy of the threat while maintaining suspense. Psychological stress is a constant undercurrent. The crew must manage fear, fatigue, and dwindling morale while engaging with immediate physical threats. This duality, external danger versus internal strain, is a recurring theme, reinforcing the narrative's realism and emotional depth. Characters' responses to these pressures vary, revealing strengths, vulnerabilities, and the consequences of prior decisions. Terry's leadership is tested not just by the Anaconda, but by the crew's trust and capacity to coordinate under duress. The Anaconda's behavior continues to demonstrate strategic intelligence. Its attacks are varied, from ambushes in confined river sections to sudden strikes from submerged positions. The filmmakers avoid repetition by designing each encounter to exploit both environmental constraints and human error. This adaptive approach ensures that the creature remains a persistent, credible threat, sustaining audience engagement throughout multiple high-intensity sequences. Terry's strategic ingenuity culminates in a series of coordinated maneuvers designed to outsmart the Anaconda. Fire, traps, and environmental manipulation are employed not just to defend, but to force the creature into disadvantageous positions. These sequences are visually striking and narratively satisfying, blending physical danger with calculated strategy. The tension is amplified by careful pacing and cinematography, creating a rhythm that alternates between suspenseful anticipation and explosive action. Human dynamics continue to play a critical role. Trust, ethical decision-making, and collaboration are essential to survival, contrasting sharply with Saron's self-interest. This thematic layer underscores the narrative's focus on leadership, morality, and human ingenuity. Every action, from tactical positioning to interpersonal negotiation, has tangible consequences, reinforcing the stakes and maintaining engagement. Environmental interaction remains a key component of suspense. The Anaconda exploits natural features, and the crew must respond dynamically. Submerged branches, narrow channels, and turbulent currents are not mere set pieces, but integral elements of both threat and strategy. This integration reinforces the film's realism, ensuring that danger is multifaceted and continuously evolving. The climax features an intense convergence of creature threat, environmental hazards, and human conflict. Every prior narrative thread, character development, ethical dilemmas, tactical ingenuity, and environmental peril, culminates in a sequence that tests both Terry's leadership and the crew's cohesion. The filmmakers maintain suspense through a combination of pacing, perspective shifts, and unpredictable creature behavior, ensuring that the final confrontation is both emotionally and physically gripping. As the final moments unfold, the crew's survival is a function of intelligence, collaboration, and calculated risk. Terry's leadership, honed through successive crises, proves decisive. The narrative reinforces that survival is not simply about reacting to danger, but anticipating it, leveraging both knowledge and environmental understanding. The Anaconda, formidable throughout, is ultimately confronted through a combination of human ingenuity, courage, and ethical decision-making, providing a satisfying resolution that feels earned. The resolution balances action and character payoff. The surviving crew members reflect on their ordeal, acknowledging both the physical and psychological toll of their journey. Terry's arc, from cautious observer to decisive leader, is completed, with her growth grounded in realistic experiences rather than contrived plot devices. The story's emphasis on strategy, morality, and adaptability underpins a conclusion that is both thrilling and narratively coherent. In the aftermath, the film subtly reinforces its thematic concerns: human ambition, ethical leadership, and the power of environmental awareness are all validated through the resolution. Saron's manipulative actions, while initially threatening, are exposed and neutralized, emphasizing that self-interest unchecked by ethical consideration can be self-destructive. The Anaconda's defeat or neutralization underscores the narrative's focus on adaptability, intelligence, and courage, rather than relying solely on brute force. The final sequences leverage cinematic techniques to maintain tension and payoff. Slow motion, dynamic camera movement, and selective framing emphasize the physicality of confrontation, while close-ups and reaction shots highlight emotional stakes. The filmmakers ensure that both spectacle and character arcs receive equal attention, delivering a climax that satisfies both visually and narratively. Overall, this final part of the story intricately weaves together physical, psychological, and ethical threads. The Anaconda remains a compelling, intelligent antagonist. The environment is a continuous, multifaceted threat. Human dynamics are richly developed, and Terry's evolution is fully realized. By integrating these elements, the filmmakers create a narrative that sustains suspense, engages emotionally, and delivers a high-stakes resolution that feels earned, grounded, and compelling. Anaconda premiered in the summer of 1997, a period when Hollywood was in the midst of a curious phase for creature features and environmentally themed thrillers. The timing was strategic. The late 90s saw audiences hungry for high-concept thrillers that combined exotic locales with visceral danger. Films like Jurassic Park, 1993, had already proven that audiences loved being transported to remote, wild environments where nature itself became a formidable antagonist. Anaconda tapped directly into that appetite, offering a snake-centric horror adventure that promised a different type of predatory terror, something primal, constrictive, and intimate compared to the massive dinosaurs of Spielberg's universe. From an industry perspective, Anaconda was part of a wave of mid-budget films designed to capitalize on the international appeal of the exotic and the frightening. Columbia Pictures, the studio behind the project, understood that the visual hook of a giant snake stalking its victims through the Amazon rainforest could deliver both domestic box office appeal and strong overseas sales. Exotic wildlife horror was a niche that hadn't been fully exploited on a large scale yet, and the marketing leaned heavily into the spectacle of a monstrous, intelligent predator. The timing of the release, midsummer, allowed it to occupy a slot where audiences were willing to pay for thrill-driven entertainment without competing directly with larger tentpole franchises like Men in Black or The Lost World: Jurassic Park, which had staggered release dates. The late 90s were also a period of experimentation with practical effects and CGI integration. Anaconda sits at a fascinating intersection of this trend. While the visual effects were ambitious for the time, the filmmakers opted for a blend of animatronics, practical effects, and early digital enhancements to render the titular snake. This approach gave the creature a tangible presence on set, which actors could interact with, enhancing performance authenticity. For contemporary audiences, the combination of practical effects and nascent CGI created a heightened sense of realism, and the industry took note. Even with budget limitations, the execution showcased the potential for hybrid effects in creature-centric storytelling. Another contextual factor was the growing appeal of ensemble casts in thriller narratives. The 90s saw ensemble-driven adventure and horror films as an effective way to sustain tension across multiple characters with varying skills and personalities. Anaconda employed this strategy effectively, balancing established actors with emerging talent to create both audience recognition and narrative flexibility. Jennifer Lopez, who had recently transitioned from music and television into mainstream cinema, brought star power and audience draw, while Jon Voight provided gravitas and a recognizable presence that lent credibility to the film's more outlandish premise. The mixture of fresh faces and veteran actors was a calculated move, reflective of industry strategies aimed at blending commercial viability with narrative engagement. Critically, the late 90s audience expectations leaned toward spectacle, and Anaconda was positioned to meet these demands. The marketing campaign emphasized both the size and cunning of the snake, framing it as a character with agency rather than a mindless predator. Trailers highlighted extreme situations, river ambushes, jungle perils, and claustrophobic encounters that played directly to thrill seekers. Industry analysts recognized that such marketing could drive mid-tier box office returns without the pressure of blockbuster competition. Furthermore, the global fascination with exotic locales helped the film secure distribution deals and television rights abroad, ensuring profitability through multiple channels. The production schedule and release timing also reflect broader industry trends of the era. Summer 1997 was competitive, with several high-profile releases, but Anaconda carved out its niche by leaning into genre conventions that weren't directly competing with sci-fi or action franchises. The studio banked on the novelty of a jungle predator thriller, combined with an accessible star ensemble to capture audiences seeking both adrenaline and escapism. This positioning speaks to a wider pattern in late 90s Hollywood. Mid-budget genre films could achieve significant returns through strategic marketing and well-timed release windows, even in a marketplace increasingly dominated by blockbuster tentpoles. Cultural context also played a role. Environmental awareness was rising in mainstream media, and films featuring wildlife and remote ecosystems had the added appeal of exoticism intertwined with cautionary narratives about human intrusion. The Amazon, as the film's primary setting, was already a symbol of both natural wonder and peril. This backdrop allowed the filmmakers to explore tension rooted in environmental realism. Unpredictable terrain, natural predators, and the isolation of human characters in a vast, uncharted wilderness. While the film prioritized thrills over educational content, the context of environmental hazard lent the story an added layer of verisimilitude that resonated with contemporary audiences. From a business standpoint, the late 90s also marked an era of international co-productions and cross-market appeal. Films like Anaconda were designed with global audiences in mind, ensuring that the suspense, spectacle, and exoticism translated well across cultural and language barriers. The studio invested in dubbing, subtitling, and strategic international releases, reflecting a growing understanding that mid-tier thrillers could achieve significant revenue streams beyond the domestic box office. This approach also helped foster a dedicated fan base that appreciated creature features as a specific subgenre, setting the stage for future sequels and spin-offs. The critical reception, while mixed, also mirrors industry dynamics. Critics noted the film's reliance on genre tropes, yet many acknowledged the technical ambition of the practical effects and the immersive use of the Amazonian setting. Audience reception tended to skew more positive, with appreciation for the film's combination of suspense, spectacle, and character-driven tension. This divide between critical and audience reception was not uncommon in the 90s, particularly for high-concept thrillers that emphasized entertainment value over narrative innovation. Studios learned from this, recognizing that profitable mid-tier films could thrive even amid lukewarm critical response if they delivered on visceral thrills and spectacle. The legacy of Anaconda within its industry context is significant. It demonstrated that creature features could remain commercially viable in the late 90s, providing a blueprint for hybrid practical CGI effects and ensemble-driven narratives. The film's release timing, marketing strategy, and global distribution model influenced subsequent productions in similar subgenres, including films featuring other apex predators or exotic wildlife threats. By tapping into audience fascination with danger, adventure, and isolated environments, Anaconda carved out a space that combined spectacle, narrative tension, and human drama in a way that was both commercially strategic and culturally resonant.